Larson earlier.
Yes, that was real audio from Shane van Gisbergen's radio during the Cup Series race at Richmond, a rare Saturday night edition of some NASCAR action. So here we are on Sunday. We do the Monday after on Mondays. I'm sitting here on Sunday doing nothing, so I figured, hey, let's get the SVG recap out of the way, and then we can do the Monday after, and we can kind of just talk about whatever, spend that 15 to 20 minutes doing other random stuff. So tomorrow we will have the Monday after, our normal post-race kind of live stream, chat, whatever you want to call it. And then I will also start up championship cases again tomorrow on Monday. But Shane van Gisbergen at Richmond. Yes, it's his first ever Cup Series start at Richmond. So let's talk about the track. Let's talk about the race, how he did. Richmond, it's a 3/4 of a mile track, which is equivalent to 1.21 kilometers. Here you go. Here's a nice view of it. Went to Richmond Raceway a couple of years ago. Drove a couple laps around it, so that was cool. But here's the front stretch. As you can see here, there is some banking. It's a curved front stretch, the D-shaped oval. 8 degrees of banking on the front stretch. The turns have 14 degrees of banking, and then the back stretch basically flat, only 2 degrees. So as I said, it's basically a flat back straightaway. SVG in this race last year in the Xfinity Series finished 15th, as I mentioned earlier, has never started a race here in Cup. It's a bottom dominant track. You usually sit right on that yellow line right at the bottom of the racetrack. You can try your best to run side by side, and we did see some great action last night. We saw a great race. If you missed the race, go watch the highlights or go rewatch the race. It was a very exciting race, but we saw guys too wide, or we usually see guys too wide side by side, but they're on each other's doors. You can really only run those 2 lanes. We've seen people venture out and try to run a higher line before at Richmond. I believe it was the 2016 race, if I remember correctly, where we saw some guys really venturing out there closer to the wall like you would see at a Homestead, a Darlington, a Bristol. But you really don't see that at Richmond a lot. You may be wondering, why am I talking about this right now? Well, you will see here in a minute. But as I said, Richmond, it's a short track. It's a bottom-dominated track. It's a track that is very difficult to pass at historically, but with the high tire wear last night, made for quite the entertaining race. So SVG gets reminded before the race, in which he qualified 27th. I guess I should have brought that up. He qualifies 27th. He did scrape the wall in his qualifying effort. No real massive damage, though. They were fine. But he gets reminded to manage his tires. And as I said, the tires were wearing a lot last night. It's usually, we see instances like this where it's a high tire wear race at a short track or any track really, and it's usually the veterans who kind of rise to the top. Biggest example was last year in the spring race at Bristol. We saw extreme tire wear where people were having to pit every 40 laps at Bristol, where usually, like for example, this past spring, like you could run 150 laps on those tires and be fine, like have barely any tire wear. Well, this one random off race at Bristol, you were having to pit every 40 laps and really manage your tires. I bring that up because we usually see the veterans kind of rise to the top of the leaderboard. We see those guys end up winning or at least finishing really well. So for example, in that race I just referenced, at the front of the field in the finishing results, we saw Denny Hamlin win that race. Martin Truex Jr. finished second. I think Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, like veterans, champions in the top 5. Whereas Ty Gibbs, who's a very quick driver, a very young driver, led the most laps that day. I think he even swept the stages, but because he didn't manage his tires at the end, I think he ended up finishing 10th or 11th. So I bring that up to emphasize managing tires was a very heavy emphasis last night, and that it was a very important key factor to this race. SVG being a veteran, being someone who knows how to manage the tires very well, that was something that played to his advantage despite never being at Richmond in a Cup car before. So early in that first run, SVG talked about how tight his car was. This first stint was really their worst stint. They started 27th and they kind of just slowly made their way up. 26th, sat there for 10 laps. 25th, sat there for 10 laps. fell back to 26th. Like, they were just kind of 25th to 27th for the first stint, which was about 30 laps. I'm telling you guys, these tires were being worn fast, and necessarily you didn't have to. I'll explain the split strategy here in a minute. But SVG was complaining about his car being extremely tight, trying to run that bottom, trying to run the traditional Richmond groove, but then all of a sudden, like lap 24, Shane van Gisbergen starts going pretty high. It's like, oh, he just missed the corner. Okay, all right, gather it up, get back in a rhythm. He just did it again in 3 and 4. He just did it the next lap. He just did it in 3 or 4 again. He's done 3, 4. He's still doing it. What are you doing? Why are you up there? Get down from there. No, you're not. Why are you up there? Shane van Gisbergen discovered something for himself. He figured out how to make up some time at Richmond. As I said, Richmond is not a track historically that you run super high up. For reference, I'm going to give you a visual reference. There are dotted lines or painted lines, striped lines. It's kind of like your street. You go out on a 3-lane highway and you got the dashes on the street to kind of tell you which lane's which. That's kind of the same at Richmond. Obviously, you don't have to obey the law because it's a racetrack, but those are great reference points. I mentioned earlier, you usually see the side-by-side racing like we saw with Ryan Blaney and Austin Dillon, where they're on each other's door, they're both below the white line, or the outside car's right side tires are right on that white line. There were times in this race, Shane van Gisbergen was entering the turn with his left side tires on the furthest outside white line. Where did this come from? We did see a few other people attempt this. I think Kyle Busch, he tried this for quite a bit. We saw Eric Jones do it. We saw Ross Chastain do it. So there were a few people that attempted this, but SVG, I mean, granted, I only watched the SVG onboard footage, but he was doing this for a lot of the race, and this was kind of the trend of the race. For the first 20 to 25 laps of a run, he would stick on that bottom. He would go the traditional Richmond groove right on that yellow line, but then his car would get really tight. His car would start to wear out the front tires, the right front tire. He couldn't make it stick going down to the turn, so he had to take a high line. He had to go really, really far outside for Richmond standards and kind of cool off those front tires in a sense, or not just abuse those front tires, and he found a way to make it work. Somehow, some way, he was able to find a way to make speed for a good chunk of this race on not just the second lane, not just outside of someone. He was able to freaking go on the highest dotted line on Richmond and make speed of it all night long. And back to that quote on Larson, this happens later. I know we're only on like lap 20 and I'm going on this whole like explanation of how Richmond, you're not supposed to go this high normally. Kyle Larson, he is known for the Larson line. I guess I should have done that with both fingers. The Larson line, which is essentially getting centimeters away from the wall, even millimeters away from the wall at Homestead, Darlington, Bristol, like any track where you can run the wall. Kyle Larson's there. He's on the wall. He's running it before anyone else. Chicagoland, Kansas, like it's known as the Larson line for a reason. So anytime, even if it's someone else, if Ross Chastain in a couple weeks at Darlington is just ripping the wall every single lap, not even trying to dime in the corner, not even taking the bottom, he's just ripping the wall, you're going to look at that and go, ooh, Chastain's taking the Larson line. Like it's just a thing. We just call it the Larson line because Larson, the dirt racer, he's always up on that wall, always pushing it to the absolute limit. So that is why Josh Williams at one point during a caution came on the radio and said, yeah, man, you're Shane Van Larson tonight. You're running your own version of the Larson line. Like, you can't get on the wall at Richmond, but you're getting so high up there, Kyle Larson might as well try it because that's what he's known for. So it's the Shane Van Larson line, if that makes sense. Anyways, let's get back to the actual race. I've explained so much nonsense in this. So as I said, he's talking about how he can't run the bottom. He can't run the bottom. The tires are worn. He has no front grip. They eventually start running that outside line and they pit. I can't remember. I think it was like lap 38. So another big factor of this race with the tire wear is that like 1 to 2 laps of tires could make a difference. So if you waited an extra couple of laps to pit for tires, you would make up a lot of time. And if you waited 10 laps, you were a rocket ship. Like you were just insanely fast. Like If you go to any cars on boards, if they pitted and there were cars who hadn't pitted in this cycle yet, it looked like from like that scene in Star Wars where they go into light speed or whatever, or hyperspace, and all of a sudden all the stars go zooming by them. That's what it looks like if you're a driver on fresh tires against everyone else who hasn't pitted yet. So one of the other things with this outside line is that Josh Williams and Steven Doran, they kind of had this side conversation on the radio. There's different channels and whatever, where they were kind of talking about, hey, that outside line, he's making good pace, but what's this doing to the tires? Doran was kind of saying, hey, it might be better if he stays in that second lane until it rubbers up a bit so he doesn't just completely shred the tire, potentially have an issue, something happens, we have to pit and we go a lap down, and like that would just ruin the day. Josh Williams, the spotter, was pointing out, yeah, he's getting up there and stuff, but he's not really sliding the tires. He's not really hurting, like harshly abusing the tires. And then Doran came back and said, yeah, actually the data shows that he's doing a much better job at getting back to the gas, getting back to the throttle without actually, killing the tires, abusing the tires too much, kind of managing the tires, as we said, as a veteran would be expected to do. So on lap 38, they pit. This first stage was only 70 laps. So theoretically, you could have gone the whole stage without pitting. In fact, we saw 8 to 10 guys stay out and not pit. Now, this ended up hurting a lot of them. So staying out ended up not being the call. The whole strategy was there was a limited set of tires for this race. I think there was only 8 sets for the entire race. And the idea was that if you were to stay out for the entire first stage, even if you plummet from 1st to 15th like Ryan Preece did, as long as you were on the lead lap, as long as you were A-OK, if there was an extra caution in that third stage, if there was a caution with 20 to go when everyone's out of tires, you would have that extra set of sticker tires and you would be able to fly through the field and potentially win the race. So it's really betting on a late race caution. So take with that strategy what you will. SVG was not on this strategy. As I said, they pitted on lap 38. All but 11 to 13, 10, however many guys it was, pitted. They end up coming out 34th a lap down, but as I said, SVG on the fresh tires, able to blast by these guys who stayed out, get his lap back, ends up going on to finish the stage 22nd. He called the car terrible. That's the censored version. Still tight. When he's on the bottom, he kind of talked about how the right front was dead. I think that was the word that was used. And then when he moved up the track, like just everything, like all the tires, but then he got the information relayed to him that the fastest laps he was making was when he was on top of the track. And to quote, I believe it was Doran who said, "Don't be afraid to use that top." So they restart stage 2 22nd, which is where they finished stage 1. So they come out even out of the pit stop. Only 23 laps into the run, SVG's talking about how the tires are already gone, or that the car is already gone. And so that's, once again, that 20 to 25 lap range. He starts migrating up to the top of the track to try to make time up there. Talked about how he needed front grip. So once again, this was just really a repeated process for the majority of the night, except for like one time when they over adjusted and suddenly he was too loose. But I mean, like on lap 44 of 160 of stage 2, which I think was 114 of the race, they were telling him, hey, you're running top 5 lap times in the last 5 laps. So this stage 2, 160 laps, most people did a 2-stop strategy for this stage. Stop, just split it into thirds essentially, and that's what they did. They pitted on lap 56 of the stage, which was lap 126 of the race. Came back out. Doran said that this was the best the tires had looked all day in terms of the wear over a run. And then 53 laps later, they pit again. During this pit stop, however, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was coming out of his pit stall. SVG was going into his pit stall. They made a little contact. Ultimately, it was no severe damage to either car. They were both able to continue without having to even assess the damage very much, to my knowledge. Like, they didn't really have to stop for an extra 10 seconds. They didn't have to spend a caution on pit road for a lap. Like, there was no bad damage, but they did make a little bit of contact on pit road. No penalty there. So SVG, no damage from this pit stop, gets on the radio, says, sorry guys, and immediately this race goes from actually a decent race to disaster, or seemingly a disaster. The contact on pit road, and then a caution. In the middle of a pit cycle at a short track when the majority of the field is pinned a lap down, Tyler Reddick gets spun out. So SVG is back in 30th. He just pit a half lap before this caution, and he's now pinned a lap down. Like, this isn't necessarily day over, but it could be. Now, thankfully for them, they were the first car one lap down. In the very next lap, or 2 laps later, there was another caution, so they got the lucky dog. They get back on the lead lap. They go on to finish stage 2 in 18th. Not a bad night so far for Shane van Gisbergen. Said in terms of his driving, in terms of how the car was driving specifically, waiting on the front for half an hour. So waiting for the car to turn, I'm assuming. And then that's when the whole Shane van Larson quote came about during this caution. I think Josh Williams kind of lost him on pit road there as he was getting out. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, you're spotting the wrong car. Hey, I'm over here. Oh, sorry, been hard to see you all night because you've been Shane van Larson running up. We don't need to go over it again. So they restart stage 3 in 17th place. This whole stage 3 went green. And by lap 260, SVG up to 12th place. However, the tires, the story of the night, the tires. By lap 283, he said that they were done. The pit cycle started early on lap 286, and I think they started the pit cycle. SVG just thought the tires were too cooked, needed to pit now. They wanted to split this stage into thirds again, I believe, or maybe 3 stops where they were evenly like 55, 55, 55, somewhere in that range. Well, they stopped early in this one, and then they end up stopping early on the next one. So by lap 299, everything had kind of cycled out. Everything had finally kind of come back to normal after the pit cycle, and SVG was in 10th. You got to remember, he still has not scored an oval top 10 in his NASCAR Cup Series career. I think he's got a great opportunity over the next couple weeks at Daytona and Darlington, but it seemed like Richmond, a track he's never been to in a Cup car, he could get his first oval top 10 here. As I said, he may have been 10th at the moment, but very quickly lost positions because he was one of the first to pit. Tires mattered so much. Ends up dropping back to about 14th. 73 to go, he gets on the radio and says that the rear tires are done. They've been cooked. He says, I'm in trouble here. At this point, they'd fallen back to 14th. He comes on the radio and tries to say, hey, what if we tried a 2-stopper for the final 70 laps of this race? And at this point, man, Stephen Doran kind of came on the radio and said, yeah, we kind of missed that window. That's not going to work out because we don't have enough time to stop twice. So with 64 laps to go, they end up pitting for their final pit stop. That's a long, long stint on these tires, the way they'd been wearing all night. So at the front end of that run, as I said, able to make up a lot of time, able to get back into the top 10, I believe. But with 40 to go, only 24 laps into this run, he's talking about how he already has no grip, and that's when he starts to fade. I think he fell all the way back to 16th. 30 to go, he got lapped. And this is another kind of topic to discuss, another kind of NASCAR weird rule or lack of a rule. In other motorsports, you see blue flags. You see rules where if you're a lapped car, you have to get out of the way of the leader. You have to yield. You have to surrender. You can't fight back. Well, because in NASCAR, there is the lucky dog system where if you get lapped and you're the first car 1 lap down, if there's a caution, you get your lap back for free. You don't have to bet on the leader pitting and you taking the wave around. So SVG is the first car 1 lap down to leader Austin Dillon. So there is no reason for him to pull over and let someone by if they're second place, third place, fourth place, because that could open the door for whoever's behind him to pass him and get the lucky dog. And SVG ends up finishing this race the first car 1 lap down. So if a caution comes out in these last 30 laps, he gets the lead lap back. So he gets lapped by Austin Dillon. Really doesn't put up much of a fight because Austin Dillon was the best car all night. Well, then Ryan Blaney and Alex Bowman get there, and this is why I have to talk about this a little bit more in detail. Ryan Blaney gets there, tries to pass him, can't do anything about it. Bowman passes Blaney. Blaney fades massively, but then it's Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman, who needs a win to make the playoffs. Right now, he's in the playoffs, but if we get a new winner at Daytona next week, Bowman misses. So a win cures all of Alex Bowman's problems. It cures all of his stress. Alex Bowman gets to SVG with about 13 to go is when the radio communication was starting to reference Alex Bowman directly. So 13 to go, Josh Williams gets on the radio and says, hey, the 48 car is behind you. He's not for position. He's actually second place. He's coming to lap you. Once again, in NASCAR, there is no rule. You do not have to yield. You do not have to pull over and let them run away. You can fight with the lead cars. Now, there is a courtesy, a common courtesy, an unwritten rule. Like, you don't race them like if you're getting lapped by the second place guy, you're not going to race them like your life depends on it. But you can still make time. You can still run your race without racing him directly, and that's kind of what SVG did. He got back on the radio and said, hey, tell the 48 to take the bottom, and we can figure it out from there. Well, that's exactly what happened. SVG ran the top, as he said he would. Bowman went to the bottom, tried his hardest to pass SVG, but couldn't. It was a mix of factors. It was a mix of SVG was up top, kind of pinching his line, not like in a mean way, but in a Bowman couldn't go all the way up the track to carry that momentum off the turn because SVG was there. And as a result, SVG off the top had that big run to carry down each straightaway. But then it also didn't help Bowman that there were like 4 other cars in front of him in the midst of this kind of battle here in which John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Jones, Jesse Love all kind of got involved, and they're all fighting for position. They're all fighting for their own race. And while SVG's not fighting any of these guys for position, he's in position for the lucky dog. So Shane van Gisbergen does nothing wrong here. In the NASCAR world, you're allowed to fight the leaders. You're allowed to kind of, not necessarily hold them up because that sounds bad, but you're allowed to run your own race. You don't have to pull over and let the leaders by like you see in other motorsports. So Shane van Gisbergen goes on to finish 14th in the race, his best finish, or tied for his best finish on an oval this season. He also did that at Charlotte in the Coke 600, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was also a high tire wear race. So Shane van Gisbergen ties his best oval finish of the season. Once again, some good oval momentum for them to have going into the playoffs. Still looking for that first oval top 10 in the Cup Series. And once again, the Super Speedway at Daytona, Darlington in a couple of weeks, 2 tracks. I think SVG has a great chance at getting an oval top 10. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know this was a longer SVG recap. We had a lot to break down from this race, but it was quite the exciting race. I had fun with it. Austin Dillon's your winner, another new playoff competitor for Shane van Gisbergen. He moves up to 24th in the points. He'll be in the top 16 in 2 weeks' time. So thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Tomorrow we got the Monday after, and we'll do championship cases.